here. Today I want to talk to you about dealing with rain on the Appalachian Trail. So obviously every day isn't going to be sunshine and butterflies. Some days you're going to have rain and nastiness, and you have to learn to deal with those things, like mentally, and then keeping your gear dry and just trying to stay as comfortable as you can when you have 3 days of this type of weather. So let's go ahead and cover that. The truth is if you're hiking in the rain, you can have all of the fancy gear that you can think of, the most expensive stuff, and you're still going to be wet. You can have Gore-Tex boots and trail runners, and you're still going to be wet. You can have waterproof gaiters, and you're still going to be wet. If you spend enough time walking in the rain in mud puddles and being soaked, you're gonna be wet. If nothing else, you get hot while you're hiking, and having rain gear on you is gonna make you sweat. You're gonna be wet. My rain gear of choice, because it was cheap, Frog Togs, they're really cute. They're, you know, the rain pants and the raincoat and everything. 20 bucks from Walmart. I had a blue set when I first started, and then I finished the second half of the AT in this tan pair. And you know, they're not extremely durable, but on the Appalachian Trail, you're not walking through a forest of briars all the time. You know, it's a pretty well-beaten path. So as long as you're not cutting out deep into the woods, you're going to be fine. The rain doesn't really get through, I don't think, any more so than another set of rain gear. One thing that I will suggest, though, if you're going to have like a nice rain gear set, then go ahead and get something that has pit zips so you stay cooler. These do not have pit zips. But again, they're super lightweight and they're really cheap. So for rain gear, the whole AT, I spent 40 bucks. Typically a Frog Tog suit weighs in about 15 ounces. It's 18 right now because they're soaked. But the pants, you don't really need in the summertime. So that's about half of that weight that you can cull out in rain gear in the summer. All right, you can see here that other than where I've like touched my Frog Togs with my wet hands, they're pretty dry. And my shoes, on the other hand, are absolutely soaked. Let's see. Yeah. So, quit. That's gross. I want to cover in a little bit more detail about footwear in the rain. These were the shoes I had on out there. They are non-Gore-Tex. As you saw, my socks were completely soaked. I use these while on the trail. They are Gore-Tex. And with both of these, my feet got soaked. So Gore-Tex does not magically prevent your feet from getting wet. Maybe if you're just like walking through some dew on the grass or something like that. But if you're walking in the rain for a while, your feet are going to be wet. So the thing with Gore-Tex to me is it seems that they take longer to dry out. So you're really better off, in my opinion, with non-Gore-Tex trail runners or boots that will, you know, have more ventilation and will dry out faster. And trail runners are better than boots in that department. Now, with your feet being wet for an extended period of time, you can develop trench foot. And this can happen from just walking in sweat all the time. So it's really important that when you get to camp and when you get in your tent that you let your feet air out, whether it's raining or not, but especially when it's raining and you're hiking in wet footwear. So having sandals or Crocs or something like that to just put on and let your feet just air out. And it's also good to have several pairs of socks. So you want to have one pair of socks that you do nothing but sleep in. Those are to keep your feet warm and dry at night. So that means in the morning that you're probably going to have to put on, you know, a grody, nasty, soggy pair of socks and put your foot back in your wet trail runner and hike on. And yes, you might get blisters because your feet are going to be wet, but you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, you're not, you know, taking a little stroll through the park. You know, you can put on a fresh pair of socks the next day. Sometimes you need to do that just to save your mentality, but then you'll be sliding them into a wet trail runner, you know. So it's really up to your discretion. It does feel good to put on dry socks in the morning, but if you know it's going to be raining all that next day, why bother? But if you know that the sun's probably going to come out and things might dry out, then go ahead and use the new pair of socks or the clean pair of socks. But like I said, just keep one dry all the time to sleep in. That is very important to prevent hypothermia. When I started planning for my thru hike, one of the biggest questions that I had was, how am I going to keep my stuff dry? Like, how am I going to make sure that I don't have a wet sleeping bag when I set up camp at night? And so I started researching different ways to keep it dry and everything, and I never had a wet sleeping bag at night, so it definitely worked for me. What I did was I got a black contractor bag, and I can't remember the thickness, but it's pretty thick. It's durable. This one lasted me the whole trail. So anyway, I lined my pack with this bag, and then I would put anything that I wanted to stay dry inside first. But the first thing that I always put in was my sleeping bag. That way, if you're in your tent and it's raining outside, you want to put that in before you get out of the tent and make sure that it is going to be dry. So you put your sleeping bag in first, and then your sleeping pad. So those are the first things, because those are the last things that you're going to pull out at night. You don't want to have to pull out your sleeping bag, which is on top, to get to your tent when it's raining, because then your sleeping bag is sitting there getting poured on while you're trying to get your tent out. You have to pretend every day that it's just going to be pouring down rain, even if it's sunny, because you never know what's going to happen with the weather in the mountains. So first things first, sleeping bag. Next, sleeping pad. And if y'all have any questions on what I used, any of this gear, I will have a link to my gear list that's on my blog at the bottom in the show more on this video. So what else do you not want to get wet? Maybe electronics, toilet paper, toiletries, first aid kit, any of that stuff. I would suggest organizing those by individual Ziploc baggies, and then, you know, kind of gathering them in some kind of little stuff sack if you want to. And then that goes also in here in the contractor bag. Also, maybe you want to keep your spare clothes and socks, your town clothes, things like that. Any clothes that you're not wearing. You want to keep those dry. Now, this little dry sack came with my pack, and because I'm a small girl, then all of my extra clothes fit in here pretty much. So you may have to get a bigger one, and you could use this for electronics, toiletries, whatever. But so dry sacks are nice, but you don't necessarily need to spend a bunch of money on these, and you can use Ziploc bags in this, just saying. All right, so that would go in here, and then whatever else that you want to stay dry goes in there. Then the trick is you take this bag and you roll it. You roll it down and smash it down. And unless your pack literally goes for a swim in the river, your stuff in there is not gonna get wet. On a dry day, I would likely put my tent in next because, you know, it's dry, I've got all of my stuff around, and you know, I'm slowly packing up, getting out of my tent and everything. So I might throw it all out and then pack up my tent and put it on top of the bag that's holding everything I don't want getting wet. On a rainy day, you may do that in a different order. The reason I would put my tent in next is because I want things that I will access frequently on top. If you want to pull your food bag out during the day and get a snack, or take your water filter out, you know, your hydration bladder, if you're using one of those, the bladder will be connected to this tube. So it's just, from here on, it's things that it doesn't really matter if it gets wet, or it's not going to hurt them to get wet. On a wet day though, you may pack everything up inside your tent and then put the tent in on the top last. All right, once you got everything all packed up and all zipped up, I always keep my Tyvek on the outside, because it doesn't matter if it gets wet, it's gonna be wet anyway on the ground. It's Tyvek. That I keep my pack cover in this little compartment down here. You know, you'll find different places in your pack and organize it like you like to. But then it just covers up. And these will not keep your pack and everything in it dry. So do not rely on this to keep your sleeping bag dry. You'll have several wet nights. This, you know, you'll actually see on your pack, the outside of your pack gets wet. It kind of repels water to an extent, but it does not waterproof it. And then, I mean, your back is somewhat exposed, and you know, everything's just going to be soaked. Especially if you start attaching things to the outside, like if you have a foam sleeping pad, make sure you buy a pack cover large enough to cover that. Mine wasn't. This one came with the pack. I just made do. Things to help waterproof your pack, like your pack cover and your rain gear, you want to keep on the outside, or, you know, in a pocket that's real easily accessible, because like I said, I mean, the rain can hit quickly and you'll find yourself soaked. So you want to be able to throw your pack down and just get everything out as fast as possible if you're going to continue to hike in the rain. I do recommend always carrying duct tape and floss and a needle with you. Obviously the floss, you can, you know, multi-purpose floss your teeth, and you can repair things like frog togs. And with duct tape, you know, if you get a tear in your frog togs or in your pack cover, I mean, you can just put it on and it helps. And I actually continue to use this the rest of the time. And I think this happened in like Virginia. I've had some people ask, well, what do I do about putting a wet tent in my pack? Well, if you pack it the way that I told you, you know, in the contractor bag, even if, you know, water runs out of your tent onto your stuff, it's gonna be protected and it's gonna stay dry. It sucks because you're carrying around the extra water weight in your tent, but if you protect your stuff and pack it to stay dry, it's not really gonna matter. There are some packs that are more or less waterproof or resistant, like the Cuban fiber packs, and actually I'm eyeballing a Hyperlight pack for the PCT, but I probably still have the black contractor bag. It's just nice to have it, and you can always, if you have a one-person tent, don't have the room to put your pack inside with you, you can take that, after you dump everything into your tent, you can take your contractor bag out, put your pack in it, and roll it up, and it's just kind of nice to have that option. I've had several people ask me, is there a special way to set up your tent to where, you know, you don't get it soaked on the inside if it's raining? And the truth is, for me, not really. I just set it up the same every time. And there probably are some tents that enable you to set up the fly first and then the body of the tent, but I just never really, you know, mastered that with my tent, if it's even possible. It just seemed more of a headache to do it that way than anything. The thing is, you're gonna get more and more efficient at setting up your tent, and for example, instead of throwing the body down first, I should have extended my poles and then thrown the body down and attached the poles. So, I mean, little things like that you'll get faster at, but your tent's gonna be wet on the inside, even if you do set up the fly first. I mean, everything's humid, there's a lot of moisture, your pack's gonna be damp, you're gonna be wet. So you can see in here probably that, yeah, there is some water on the floor of my tent right now. And this Tyvek that I use that instead of a footprint. Anything outside the Tyvek has the potential to, you know, kind of get wet from the ground, so it's important to center that up the best that you can. What I always do is I just take a bandana and I'll kind of dry everything off once I get in my tent. And if, you know, you have a sleeping pad, it's going to keep your sleeping bag from getting wet, but it's going to get a little damp. I mean, everything's just gonna be wet. Now, a lot of people will keep their nasty trail runners. I mean, these would be a lot more gross if I had been hiking today, and they are wet, but a lot of people keep them outside in the vestibule or under the vestibule, outside the body of the tent. Or you can keep them in the corner, you know, just kind of away from everything. They might dry out a little bit better inside the tent, but I mean, not much more. I would say the most important thing about setting up your tent, though, is just making sure that the fly is not touching the body of the tent. So you see, now it's touching, and now it's not waterproof, and that moisture will come through. But if your tent is set up taut, your rain fly, you know, you just want everything as tight as possible, and you want to keep that rain fly off of the body of the tent, and you should sleep pretty dry. So another important part of staying dry while you're sleeping in the rain is your site location. So you don't want to set up in like a dip where rain is going to collect and you're going to be laying in a puddle all night. Also, you can set up your tent, you know, under tree cover to help keep it dry while you're actually setting it up. But keep in mind to look out for any like dead limbs or trees or branches, things like that, because you don't want the wind blowing and those falling on you while you're sleeping at night. And then also, you can wait, you know, you can hike until the rain kind of dies down, but there are going to be days where it's just going to be pouring and you're just going to have to go ahead and set up your tent in the pouring rain. So how do you deal with this mentally? Well, I don't really know how to tell you how you will deal best with this, but I can tell you what I did. So, I mean, there were several stretches where I had rain for 3 or 4 days at a time. Like through the Smokies, it was cold and rainy, and that's like my kryptonite. I could deal with cold, I could deal with rain, but cold rain is just the worst. And the best thing that you can do is just remember that not every day is going to be like this. Like the sun is going to shine again. It's not going to rain forever, even though sometimes it really feels like it is. Also, I tried to make a point to notice how the forest was more beautiful when it rained. You know, of course, it's not fun walking in pouring rain, but after a few days of rain, the leaves are much greener, everything's more vibrant, and I just really tried to take note of that and appreciate the forest in all situations, you know, in the sunshine and in the rain. And, you know, you just have to tell yourself, like, I will not quit on a bad day. So it's very easy for anybody to quit on a bad day. I mean, that's when people normally quit things, you know, is when they're not having a good time. So if you're having a bad day and it's raining and you're thinking about quitting, don't. Wait until the next sunny day and you're sitting out on a ledge and the sun's shining and the birds are chirping and everything's wonderful. And if you still want to quit that day, then it's time for you to go home. But otherwise, just make a promise to yourself before you get out here in this situation that I will not quit on a bad day, and I will wait till a sunny day before I decide, okay, this isn't for me anymore. And then you just have to keep in mind that no rain, no pain, no Maine. So the only way you're going to get to Maine is to have struggles like this and to have bad days and to be rained on a little bit. But you know what? It gives you grit and it shows you who you really are, and it'll help you appreciate things later in life, like a dry bed and a roof over your head. Well, I hope y'all found that helpful. If you have any suggestions of how you've dealt with rain on the trail or any questions about anything that I said today, please just comment below. And if y'all would like to support me hiking the PCT and continuing this channel, then there are several ways to do so, some even at no additional cost to you. So just click the show more below this video, and you can see ways to do that. But anyway, we'll see y'all next time. Okay, so I am here at Amicalola State Park, and there's this nice little compartment overhead, so that's the opening, where you can put like a headlamp